All right, welcome everybody. My name's David. I'm a ranger at Katmai National Park. I'm joined again this morning by Barbara Lutz. We're here for the next hour or so to give you a play-by-play. If you're not familiar with the play-by-play setup, it's a lot like sports commentary for bears. So we're going to be on for the next hour or so. Feel free to enter any questions you have into the chat window below the video feed on explore.org. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. And sit back and enjoy the show. We're just going to kind of share our thoughts on the behaviors that we're seeing from the bears. Hopefully give a little information about some of the individuals we're seeing. And just have a good time bear viewing.
It's always a good time bear viewing. I can't think of anything better to do than bear viewing.
That's right. So on screen now we've got the legendary 480 Otis hanging out in his office as usual. And he's joined by 747. We had a few other bears here earlier as we got started. I think we might have scared them away with the broadcast.
Yeah, and sadly enough, we scared 128 and her cubs, affectionately known as the Nuts. They were here right when we arrived and left. One thing I wanted to point out, I don't know if you can pull the camera back so that we can see the falls.
Yeah.
It seems to me like we've got a little pulse of silver salmon coming up. I've seen quite a few more jumping right now. There's one. So that kind of leads us to talk a little bit about how the salmon come up the stream in pulses. You want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, it's especially noticeable with the sockeye salmon because there's so many more of them.
Right.
But yeah, salmon migrate in pulses. They migrate kind of, and you know, when it's highly regulated. So when the boats are out in the water, they're taking as many fish as they can. If they really wanted to, they could probably take all the fish. Of course, it's, like I said, highly regulated, so at certain times of the day they're allowed to fish, at other times they're not, and that kind of adds to those pulses. When the fishermen aren't, when they don't have their nets in the water, fish are all getting through, and so we'll see these big, huge groups come in. In addition to that, there's the tides, the tidal influence of Neck River. This salmon will swim in on the high tide, get kind of a boost, and come in groups that way.
Yeah, with the silver salmon, a lot of times people on the platform are like, why aren't there any salmon jumping? What are the bears even catching? It looks like 747 just got one. They all have been catching a lot of fish lately, and so with the silver salmon are big, and right now we can see the red sockeye salmon in the water, and then when the fish that are jumping are these big silver salmon. Once they start and have a little, the pulses of course are much smaller, but they do seem to come in little groups, and all of a sudden all the bears are catching fish, and
right. Yeah, and sometimes when there are fewer salmon jumping, that's when we see more bears.
Right.
It takes them a lot longer to fill their bellies up when the fishing isn't so easy, so they'll kind of accumulate here. And sometimes you can see 10, 15, even 20 bears all hanging out here at the falls.
Yeah, it's very counterintuitive.
Right. And we mentioned this a little bit yesterday. That's generally what we see in July, is they're learning, hey, this is a good place to eat right now.
So I know I knew I wanted to ask you a question. Here's a question. So I know all about that the fishermen fish for the sockeye heavily, but what about the silver salmon run? Is there fishermen out in the bay who are all focusing on silver right now? There
are far fewer though. Mm-hmm. It's quite a bit less lucrative. I think in other areas of the world there are larger silver salmon runs. We have a substantial one here, but the sockeye salmon, that's what people come in for. Over half of all the wild sockeye salmon in the world come from Bristol Bay. I think you were looking at the numbers earlier. Upwards of 50 million salmon came in through Bristol Bay this year.
Yeah, I had heard 59 million yesterday. Yep. I was like, wow, that's, because I'd been using 50 million. Not that that's a small number.
Right. And it's hard to grasp, what that would really look like.
Right. And of course, they don't all come up this river, but several million did, and I fondly remember watching when there was covered in salmon and watching even the subadults or 503 moving through, and I called it fish herding because
yeah.
They would walk and there's just fish just fleeing from them,
yeah.
It
looks like the water's boiling.
Yes.
Yeah. And to give a little reference, So we said 59 million coming through Bristol Bay, which is located on the western side of the Alaskan Peninsula, right at the base of the Alaskan Peninsula. And so 50 million fish come through Bristol Bay. They go out into lots of little rivers and lake systems from there, one of which is Neck.
The other thing I wanted to mention, which of course I learned everything I know, I learned on a play-by-play. But I did just notice, if anybody who hasn't seen this before, when the fish do jump the falls, you'll see them swimming with their tails in the air, which is in order for them to hit that top of the falls and keep on going and moving with purpose up the river.
Right.
So that is, I hadn't even really thought about looking for that, but it is amazing to watch them jump the falls, ready to hit that water that's rushing so strongly, and make it up to spawn another day.
Yeah, it's amazing that they're able to make it up that 6-foot jump up the waterfall at all. You see them hit that rushing water at the top, and to be able to power through that current is really incredible.
Yeah, and that is a good perspective to talk about that, the falls being 6 foot tall. If you look at 6 foot tall compared to the shoulder height of 747 there, you can
Right.
really kind of have an idea of how large that bear is. Even Otis, sitting in his Zen spot, doing his Zen thing, is, you can tell from the size of the falls what size that bear is. Huge bear. Of course, he is the crowned king of the Fat Bear contest last year.
That's
so,
right.
We believe he's working on defending that crown this year. He's a jumbo jet of a bear.
Yeah, the name is very appropriate. The number, rather. People ask a lot, how heavy do we think he is, and we can only guess. We've never seen him get on a scale. What's your guess, Barbara?
What, 800-900 pounds?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess around the same, somewhere around 900.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, this brings up a lot of people ask us if they're chipped, if they're collared, if they have GPS on them.
Right.
And they do not. We don't have any way of weighing these bears. They're wild bears. They're not interfered with in any way, unless, we've told the story of Divot before, when we removed the snare that was life-threatening and a human-made danger to her. But these bears come and go as they please, and do not have any sort of tracking devices except for, our visual observations of them.
Right.
So shall I go through a string of questions that I've already been asked this morning?
Absolutely.
All right. Question number 1. Aren't those bears getting cold in that water?
Well, they've got a lot of fat on them to protect them, much like a seal or an otter. Their fur is pretty warm as well. They've got those long guard hairs with under fur underneath. We have a pelt of a bear in the visitor center that I actually felt just last night, once again.
Me too. Up here we have a bear coming down the...
Oh, yeah.
So, it's dark. Could be Walker.
Yep, looks like 151.
Yep, what a beautiful bear.
Another thing about the temperature, about bears being cold, the water actually isn't quite as cold as you might expect. The water heats up significantly in Lake Brooks, where it flows from, has a chance to sit there and be heated by the sun. It's also not glacially
that 503
fed.
is coming down. They went off totogether.
They always do seem
These little
to
buddies.
come in a pair.
And then we'll see what happens. We have 503's little shadow
Right.
is kind of in between here and the riffles.
Pan over there for a minute.
Now that little bear has been doing some successful fishing down there.
Yeah. Not all the subadults are as successful as one another. And this one seems to be doing pretty well.
I wanted to talk about, my volunteer experience comes from interpreting gray whales and elephant seals, and I've been actually thinking quite a bit about how many similarities there are between elephant seals and brown bears. One of them is that they are mammoth creatures that have a lot of fat on them, fur, and it generates an enormous amount of heat for them to move around. With the elephant seals, I've seen thermal images of them when they have those big male battles, and they just are blazing hot after just a very little activity. So that's one of the similarities between these bears. The other thing is that they don't eat for long periods of time. These bears don't eat for about 6 months during hibernation. Elephant seals don't eat at all when they're in their mating and birthing experience, and that can be 4 months, and it's about the same, 30% weight loss.
Wow, interesting.
When they're on the beach. So it's just kind of interesting. Also, when elephant seals dive to 5,000 feet, their bodies go into a kind of a hibernation state. And it was kind of interesting because I'm reading about the bears, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of interesting how many parallels there are between mammals that are completely different animals, but share some characteristics that you wouldn't think.
Yeah.
Okay, what's another question that I was asked this morning? Of course, now my mind is going blank.
Well, I've got one here. We were talking about water temperature.
Oh, right.
Which I don't think I mentioned, by the way. It's somewhere between 40 and 50 degrees. It changes quite a bit over the course of the season. But we got another question about the water level. How has that changed over the year? It does change quite a bit out in the lake, and that's normal. It'll be very, very low in the beginning of the year, and right around now is kind of where it peaks. It'll get about as high as it's going to be, and the flow rate seems to be fairly steady. We have a team of researchers in the Southwest Alaska Network that measure water level and water temperature between Lake Brooks and Neck Lake, but not necessarily Brooks River. So from looking at the two measurements, we can get a good idea of what it's like in the river, but we don't have really exact measurements.
Okay, here's another question I was asked. What is Otis doing? What is he looking at?
He's looking for food, of course, or maybe sleeping.
Yeah, that's right. He could be nodding off.
Yeah, he's got a very unique fishing style. We see a lot of bears do the sit and wait technique. There's a few bears doing it now, aside from Otis, and I've kind of zoomed in on him now, but he seems to be more patient than the other bears. He's really honed that technique. He doesn't expend a whole lot of energy, just kind of hangs out, waits for the fish to come right up to him, and then he doesn't have to move too far and exert too much strength to get a hold of them.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Earlier in the year, he didn't really spend all that much time in the office.
Right.
Of course, we're using terms here that many might not know.
Of course.
Right? Where Otis is sitting is known as Otis's office. And earlier this year, he was out and about quite a bit more. I was surprised, but
Maybe he was getting a little crowded in his office.
Could be. Yeah. Then also often don't think that the jacuzzi is a favorite spot. But it seems to just depend. Earlier this summer when 32 Chunk was kind of ruling the show, he was over there where 747 is. And when the water level was a little lower, it was like a fish conveyor belt over there. You could actually see the fish who had were either boiling up over there or jumping the falls, just falling back right into that area. So the jacuzzi is a prime fishing spot simply because the fish that are trying to jump the falls will fall back and just hit the bear, and they don't have to expend any energy, just trap it against their body or on the ground.
Right.
And that's the name of the game is calories in, calories out. We all know that weight loss formula. It's also a weight gain formula. That's not our normal way to think about things, but definitely you want to burn less calories, eat more calories if you're a bear.
Right. And some bears are real specialists. They figure out how to fish one area and that's their go-to. They might try some other things out, but that's what they're really successful at. Other bears are a little bit more adaptable. 503 at the bottom right-hand screen of the corner here. He's a good example of a very adaptable bear. Seems he can fish almost anywhere. At least he's learning to fish almost anywhere.
That's right.
Out of necessity. Younger bears like 503 will get pushed around quite a bit by larger bears.
Have a great awareness of what's going on in the falls. He'll sneak into the jacuzzi just for a few moments to see if he can catch a fish.
Yep.
And he's huge. He's successful.
Yes. Yep, size is a good indicator of success for bears here on the Brooks River.
Now let's talk a little bit about who we don't see here right now. I don't believe we have any female bears unless that little subadult. I shouldn't call her a little subadult. I think she's a female, but I don't know.
Sure.
We don't know.
Yeah,
but we've got a bunch of big male bears here right now.
Yep. And that's pretty typical. Earlier this year in July, we did see probably more females, more family groups here than normal.
Yeah, we had all swim one night.
What's that?
We had all swim. The lifeguard let the children in the pool. Otis was the only male there that night.
Yeah, and you know that's probably why they were there. There weren't a whole lot of males.
Well, Grazer had just chased them out.
She does tend to chase a lot of bears out of the way.
Yeah.
So a little earlier, we did see a 128 in the area. She's hasn't shown up since. We'll see if she comes back around, but we've seen a lot more action from the family groups and from the females down on the lower river in the last few weeks, seeing bears start to return from the August lull.
Yeah, yesterday was my day off, and I tried to come to the falls twice yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And Beadnose, 409, and her cubs were sleeping in all the right places.
You know, bridge closures are such a great example that, you know, we can't control nature. We're here to preserve nature and let it be wild, and being inconvenienced is part of that.
Well, and being a cam watcher, I have no idea what happened at the falls yesterday because I couldn't get here. I'm here, but I couldn't get here.
Right.
I was reading this Heart of Katmai, which is a really great history, and yesterday I was reading quite a bit about the development of the infrastructure here, and I was astonished to learn that at one point the falls viewing area was 2 benches 15 feet from the falls.
Right.
That's
Things
amazing.
have changed.
Yeah, well, and it's created a lot of a lot of discussion about, well, if you build it, they will come.
Sure.
So building more platforms and things means more visitors and very few resources here. But yeah, 2 benches 15 feet from the falls. I was like, wow. Of course, now back then they probably didn't have as many bears. That's the other thing that to keep in mind is these bears have not always been here in these numbers. Not until this area was protected, and the public was not allowed here before 1949.
Right. So time is flying here. We're already 20 minutes in. Maybe we can give a little, preview of what bears we're seeing here. Do the rounds, so to speak.
Bear cam viewers like to say he has red pajamas.
Yep.
So.
Yep. I think of them as fleece pants.
Fleece pants.
Yep.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So that's one of the things that we find is these bears' appearance changes through the summer, and when they all do tend to go away normally in August, and they fish other streams. They come back. They might look very different.
Right.
32 Chunk took a little. He tried to be the dominant male at the falls. I guess he was the dominant male at the falls.
At the time,
for the
certainly.
summer, he was the dominant male at the falls, and then things kind of fell apart when Grazer was 128. Grazer was here and chased him all the way up the hill one night. But it was interesting watching him be a tough guy. There is some video of him playing as a youngster.
Right.
And there's some pictures of him as a young bear with his large derriere. He's been chunked for a very long time.
Yeah. And this year he was seen playing with a number of bears as well. Despite at other times of the day, maybe even just a few minutes before, pushing another bear around, being very aggressive, getting into physical fights with some bears, and then, or going off and playing with other bears.
Oh, I just thought of a question people ask all the time while we're in the middle of this. Why don't the bears eat the birds?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've never eaten a gull, but I don't think it would taste all that good or have a ton of meat on it.
I was going to say, I don't think it has a ton of fat on it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I think it's worth it to them. That would be a lot of energy to chase them around. They just fly away.
Right.
And so the birds know this, and they don't really, they'll get real close to the bears while they're eating.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the salmon can't fly away, so.
Yeah, that's true.
It makes it a better bet for a meal.
The other thing people ask is why don't the bears, I think we talked about this yesterday, why don't the bears eat the fish that are right here at the base of the platform? And they can move mighty fast. In this, it's a very open area. There's nothing to trap the fish against.
Right. And we do see bears try.
Yeah, the younger bears, sometimes the moms and cubs are in this area fishing.
Doesn't take a whole lot of failed attempts to figure out, okay, this is not how it's done.
That's right. This is last resort fishing.
Right. And so next in the lineup, we've got 503 hanging out, kind of what's sort of become one of his usual spots, right?
Yeah, that bear, I just love that bear. He is, one of the things I hope I get to see while I'm here is him doing his acrobatics in the jacuzzi.
Yeah.
He has just been so much fun to watch. He just is his own. He marches to his own drum. We can tell his little story.
Yeah, please do.
His story is that he was his bio mom, 402. For whatever reason, when he was he was a yearling, he was a year and a half old, she emancipated him early. The big theory is that she was being pursued by 856, who is even larger than 747. And the area apparently pretty pitiful to watch him walking around camp.
Right.
No mom, very bad prospects. Everyone feared for his survival. Very unlikely that he would be able to get enough weight on or even know how to build a den.
Right.
So in August, the bears, as we talked about earlier, do go away, and he was lost sight of. And it was actually a cam viewer. Mike Fitz told me this story the other day. He and Jean were just looking at some pictures. Calliope Jane is the bear cam. She had taken some pictures at Margot Creek, and she said, I saw this, bear. And she was like, oh my gosh, that looks like 435 Holly.
Right.
503, and her bio cub, who is now 719. And so I've actually watched, there's a video you can see on YouTube where Mike Fitz very excitedly catches sight of them on I think it's on the spit or in that area. And they see the first video of the family group arriving back.
Okay.
And confirmed. And then Mike said, I'm not going to believe it until we see them nursing.
Right.
And then 435 was seen nursing 503. He was given a number early because he was emancipated. Cubs are not normally given numbers. He also was given the nickname Cub Adult because he was a subadult who was a cub. Anyway, she raised him alongside her bio daughter cub. There's also a nice video out there of the three of them on the spit, and 402, his bio mom, is swimming nearby. It's a nice little video of that family, adopted family. And you can see, here he is. He's very kind of casually, he's alert, he's paying attention. But for a subadult, he is very casually hanging out with these big male bears.
Very confident.
Yep, and huge.
And
it's
of course,
working for him.
The story of drama kind of continued last year when 719, his, stepsister, started following around 402, 503's biological mother, and never was adopted necessarily, but certainly gained some protection from being around that family group, gained some better access to fishing locations, and seemed to have learned from watching 503 be adopted that, oh, maybe it's worth the risk to follow around a female that'll tolerate me.
And what she gained from that was another year of watching
Exactly.
very successful adult female teach her young how to be a bear in the bear world.
Exactly.
And often, she's not here now, but she's often where 503 is.
Right.
And often will pick up his scraps. There was one moment last year that was a little controversial in that people didn't really agree about what they were seeing. Because all we can see, we see what we see. We're not always sure we know what we're seeing. But
Right.
there was a moment out on the spit when 402 actually drove 435 away, and it wasn't really clear if we looked at it whether she was just protecting her own cubs or whether she was watching out for 719.
Right. Yeah, we can never really know what's going on inside the mind of a bear. We can certainly look at clues from their behavior and even from their histories.
It has been really fun watching 503 because I just keep saying, after seeing all the subadults that are running around that we cannot identify, we just cannot tell them apart. It has been such a blessing that 503 and 719 are identifiable.
Mm-hmm.
They've stuck around. A lot of times the emancipated male bears do go out and find their own territories, so
Right.
we may never see them again.
Right.
And if they came back, we might not know who they are. Most of these bears, we don't know for sure who their parents are.
Right.
But so it's been really nice to have them stick around, be identifiable, be individual characters, and so we can tell their stories.
And it probably very helpful on that too is that there weren't such a large number of cubs that were emancipated last year as there are this year.
Yeah, wait till next year, right?
Yeah. And another, very famous subadult that is not here now, as far as we know, 273's offspring, otherwise known as Velcro. It seems like every subadult looks like 273's offspring, and it's just difficult because there's 12, 14, 15 new subadults this year. They're all about the same size. Mm-hmm. They all look very similar.
73's cub, and he pointed out a subadult, and he said he thought that bear was a candidate. Even
Right.
he was like, this is just a candidate, I don't know. And
Right.
we've talked before, there is one subadult that hangs around that has that face.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But
I've seen
who
some
knows?
comparison photos
Yeah.
from viewers that are pretty darn convincing. I don't know if I'd be able to pick that bear out again from a lineup of all the subadults. To me, there's 2 or 3 that I think look like they certainly could be him.
But yeah, again, it's really nice that we can tell the story of 503 and
Right.
719 and be sure who they are and what they're doing. And
Right.
it would be nice if we could do that with Velcro, but it just isn't possible to point them out.
At least so far.
So far,
Maybe, time will change that.
Yep. All right, so it looks like Otis caught a fish.
Yep. Maybe we can talk a little bit about Otis. I'm going to zoom in on him here.
Okay.
Maybe we can get a good look at his teeth.
Oh, excellent.
We've talked a lot about in previous chats, he's missing 2 canine teeth. Upon kind of further observation this year, it looks like really all of his canine teeth are worn down to be almost nothing, just about nubs. So watching him try to strip the skin off of this salmon, he does a lot better than I would, but compared to another bear, he has a bit more trouble. It takes him a bit longer, and he probably ends up eating more flesh than he might want to.
But it certainly is successful for him. I mean,
yeah.
He is a fat bear. Just for people we keep talking about the Fat Bear contest in October.
Yep.
One October, he was talking with his, other ranger friends, and he's like, what if we had a Fat Bear contest? And at that time, it was like one day, and it was so successful. He just wanted to it's kind of an interpretation theme.
Yeah.
Fat bear. Let's talk about fat bears. Fat is good.
Yeah, fat is survival.
Fat is survival. So now, and tune in for sure, because we have brackets like NCAA brackets for fat bear contests now, and we even put those little cubs against each other. And you felt a little sorry for Peanut when she lost, but
Well, she wasn't the fattest, so
no, she
only the fattest
did
can
well.
advance.
She's back today. She's roly-poly. So anyway, we were talking about Otis when we...
Yeah, he is one of the older male bears on the river that we see. Certainly not the oldest bear that we know of. He's somewhere in his, we think, early 20s. He's definitely older than 20. And yeah, he's really persevered through a lot of challenge. With those missing teeth, he gets pushed around by other bears quite a bit because he's not the most dominant, although he is pretty large.
He's got a good roar on him.
He does.
I wanted to talk for a moment about how it is that we don't know how old a lot of these bears are.
Right.
We do happen to know that 503 is 4.5 because 503 we know who, where, when he was born. A lot of these bears you'll see in the bear book. We haven't talked about the bear book yet, but the bear book, which is available on the Katmai Park site or on the Explore site, will tell you, and then you're just kind of guessing how old they are.
And so we've been saying Otis is around 20 for about 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah, I've noticed that. He's still 20. He's like Peter Pan, right? Only
never ages after 20,
he wouldn't look
right?
great in tights, I don't think. So, yeah.
So he was first identified as a subadult or a young adult in 2001.
Okay.
So he could have been anywhere from probably 3.5 to maybe 4.5, 5.5, maybe 6.5.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that kind of uncertainty there, but somewhere older than 20.
Well, and that kind of definition of what is a subadult is interesting because it's from emancipation to sexual maturity. Now, 503 is a double winner on this, right? He's emancipated at 3.5, and I believe he was seen mating, or at least attempting to mate.
Right.
Of course, he chose his partner for his half-sister 719,
right.
which, there is a lot of soap opera to this.
Yes, there is.
Someone told me they thought it was like reality television. However, this is live, real, no scripted.
It's far more real.
So he could be, if the subadult is from when you're emancipated to when you're sexually mature. Now, he's probably not sexually mature, but he is definitely he's a go-getter.
Right, and we do sometimes see bears that are not sexually mature mating.
Yes.
That's not a clear indication that they're sexually mature, but that's the thing that we're getting at, is you can't really tell for sure.
All right, so we were talking about Otis. Otis is considered, people call him the Zen master because he can sit there like that. When I saw Otis on the big screen in the visitors center a couple days ago when he first showed up, that was what he was doing. I'm like, oh my God, look, it's Otis. Otis is doing his Otis thing. Then I had to march out here to the platform so I could watch Otis do his Otis thing. It's amazing. He can just concentrate, occasionally nodding off, and then with very little energy, he just kind of swipes up that fish, one right after another. And he doesn't tend to move away to eat his fish, does he?
No, he tends to eat it right there, yeah. And I think, the more I watch these bears, sometimes it's just the more questions I have. Sometimes bears eat the salmon right there where they're standing. Some have kind of favorite spots to eat them. And some are all over the board. They eat them in different places of the river. They take them off into the woods. They eat them right where they're fishing.
Have you seen Walker catch a fish today?
We did see him catch one earlier this morning, and he took it off into the woods and ate it.
Because he just is remarkable to me. He's actually a pretty big bear, but I don't really see him catch that many.
But he does gain quite a bit of weight over the course of the season, so he is successful. And we can talk about him a little bit. He's a young adult male. He's 11 and a half years old. he's pretty identifiable to me. One of the more identifiable bears. He's got that longer, upturned snout, tapers
he's
to
showing
a
it
point.
to us.
Yeah. And he's got some real big ears.
He's got what we call the Mickey Mouse ears.
Yep. He goes through quite a transformation over the course of the summer.
Yeah, he's also darker than a lot of the bears.
Yeah,
he's
very dark in September. Yeah.
Yep. I saw 68 from the platform. He was directly beneath me, and he was very dark. He looked almost black.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be easy to confuse one of these darker bears with a black bear. They are so dark.
From a very long distance, perhaps.
Sure.
They are enormous. Oh, now he's going to do, maybe the Walker will catch a fish. That'd be great.
Yeah, prove us wrong, Walker.
Prove us wrong. Yeah, Walker is also just, he is, again, such a character.
Yeah.
He's got a pouncy style when he's not sitting right there next to that rock. Now let's see if he goes and does it for us. He can really severely annoy Otis. Otis might have to roar at him occasionally. He can annoy almost anyone, apparently.
But he knows when to back off. Earlier in the morning, he was pouncing around a bit. 747 came up into his area, and he was how far you can push the limits, though, with some bears.
Yes, and we have seen sows with a slew of cubs that have Mickey Mouse ears, so who knows? He may be successful in the courting realm, too.
Very true.
So why would there be no sows and cubs here right now?
Well, there's some pretty big dominant males that might scare them away. Large male bears are known to prey on younger bears, particularly cubs, that are very vulnerable. So for the kind of risk-reward formula that a mother bear would maybe think about, it's going to make a lot more sense to go down on the lower river, eat some spawned-out sockeye salmon, less nutritious, but very easy to catch, and not be bothered by any of these larger, more dominant bears.
The other thing that I was just thinking about is that the silver salmon, the reason these bears are probably here is because they're getting the silver salmon.
Right.
And they aren't jumping in the quantities that would make it worthwhile to stand there on the lip. A lot of the females fish on the lip.
This is true.
And there aren't any that we can see here in these areas that the less dominant bears fish. It's almost like in order to be successful with the silvers, you really do need to be in these prime fishing spots, which are occupied by large male males right now.
Right.
This is what's kind of fun about being here. You get to hear a lot of rangers talking about a lot of stuff. I heard that we can talk a little bit about the fact that these male bears will kill cubs, and that's more prominent in the fall when they are in hyperphagia.
That's right. Yeah, there's something that clicks in their brain where the bears will just consume anything and everything. We'll see them eat the entire fish much more frequently at this time of year, even if the fishing is really easy. They'll prey on cubs. It's a more dangerous time to be traveling in bear country, as bears are looking at anything for food.
Yeah, when the first day I came here, and they brought me to the yurt where I'm staying. The first thing you notice is the electric fence that's around the yurt.
Right.
As someone who hasn't been here, you're like, okay. And then the second thing you notice is the very prominent bear trail that empties out in front of the yurt. It connects up to a gravel path.
Right.
So it's like this beeline from, I've never seen a bear there, but I know that people have. They travel right past our, probably in the middle of the night. I imagine it's a bear highway a little bit.
Yeah, and something interesting about the bear fences that I certainly didn't expect when I got here. They're not all that powerful. You can touch one, And it'll give you a little zap, but not going to injure you by any means, as long as you have shoes on. Proof. They're not designed to really hurt or injure any bear. But the reason it works is because bears investigate their surroundings, and they do that with their nose. So if you've got a wet nose and no shoes on, and you go and put your wet nose on the fence, it's going to zap you a whole lot harder than when you just touch it with your shoes on.
I'll remember not to do that.
Right, right.
Yeah, there are places, this is the other thing I didn't know. There are places to eat outside the dining hall here.
Mm-hmm.
There are shelters with picnic tables, and those are surrounded by electric fences. So there's a couple of those. Then there's some places to eat in the campground. So although we are not allowed to have food, you can carry food from somewhere to the place to eat.
Right.
And you can eat it there. Even in the campground, they want people to eat at that one spot. You don't sit around the campfire and eat. You go and eat in the eating area, and then you put your food in the food cache.
Right.
There's a food cache.
Yeah, we don't starve people here,
No?
but we do want to keep the food in controllable areas and in just a few areas. And we do have this subadult that's been hanging around the area. We'll try to get some close-ups of this bear. Not one that I immediately recognize. And I'll have to admit, I haven't seen 719 knowingly seen her in about a month now myself.
719, and she's changed roles, and now we have Tammy as the bear monitor, right? She was here on the platform, and I actually did go and ask her because they just changed their appearance changes so much.
Right.
I wasn't positive it was 719 because she's also gained so much weight that it could be some. I am really bad. I'm terrible at identifying the single females.
Yeah.
I just don't know whether they're subadults or whether
It's
they're
hard,
females.
yeah.
And she confirmed it was 719, so I know she was hanging around.
And I know from seeing
here
her
we have
last
a bear
year,
coming up.
her coat changes significantly in color.
My identification of this bear that's coming up the way is it is a beautiful brown bear.
So we had 747 here at the falls for a while, and he kind of
Right.
disappeared on us. I'm not sure where or when he left, but now we have another very large bear. I don't think it's 747, but we'll wait and see if we can get a better view.
Eating, and his lips, they have very subtle, they can pick berries off with these lips. I mean, they're
Right.
these huge people, and I was reading, there's a book called Dominion of Bears, and I was reading that before I came here, and she says someone calls brown bears the Swiss Army knife
Right.
of bears. This is a great way to talk about them. They can, out at the coast, they're eating barnacles. They're opening up little clamshells and eating just with. It's amazing how they can
Yeah.
do many things just like a Swiss Army knife.
Yep. I've seen them eat the barnacles. It's really incredible. They squish their paw on the rock and smear it to
Oh.
break all the little shells, and then they lick out the little meaty animal inside.
Yeah, they have such long tongues too. Of course, their feet are incredible. You know,
Right.
the bottoms of their feet, and then I guess they shed the skin on their feet.
Yeah, over the winter.
Yeah. They have that big hump, which is muscle for digging.
Right.
For digging their dens. They can move 2,000 pounds of material to make a den.
we're getting a better look at the tree now than the bear, so I'm gonna head back over the falls and see. We'll keep an eye on this other bear, and maybe we'll get lucky and it'll walk right underneath our platform. Claws to pry them open, stomp on them. It's incredible to watch.
I see this is probably, I don't know what the, never mind. I was going to say what the cams are looking at. The cams are looking at what we decide they look at right now. How about that? I feel powerful.
We are in control.
Yep. Yeah, because this bear is coming up on Backpacks Rock. It'd be nice if you walked right by here. You really, even standing on the platform, it's hard to get a sense of how large they are until they're right here, or when they're walking past you on a trail.
That's that you figure out how big they are very quickly.
Yeah, here he comes. Right down here.
So he is, looks like, walking right underneath us here.
I was getting ready to use my binoculars. I don't think I need to. The other bears don't seem too concerned about this bear. They're taking a look at him. Looks like a male bear. Do we have any chatters who are identifying this bear for us?
Let's see. My first thought is 474. That's a bear that's a bear that we see generally only in the fall, as far as we know. Peered into the fish ladder. Keep an eye out for his reappearance. But there are quite a few bears that come out in the fall that
oh, there he is. He's still in that little cove.
Oh, there he is.
That's kind of a good place to fish.
Yeah, the fish do seem to kind of stack up there at times.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that bears don't go. Looks like he has a scar across his nose, huh? He's demonstrating his light bulb shape. That's what I call that shape of bear. That's a successful profile. Up, here we go.
So I've noticed that.
And if anybody wanted to know whether that bear can move fast,
.32 certainly does seem to get more dominant when 747 is not around.
Yeah, that is for sure.
And I didn't think it was 747 before, and I'm very sure now that this new bear is not 747.
Yeah. Now let's see whether Chunk does some rubbing on the willow.
Yeah, I wouldn't be
Time
surprised.
to do some rubbing on the willow. That poor willow. Yeah.
Gave a good little cowboy walk, that exaggerated swagger, and this is all part of that.
If you look at historic photos of this island, it used to be covered in little trees.
Right. They've taken a beating.
Even earlier, the grass was tall enough that Otis was sleeping in there before he took his 14-hour nap. I was watching, and all of a sudden he poked his head out. I had no idea he was in there. The grass was tall. All right, well, he took care of business.
Back to work.
Yeah, and then he's like, yesterday you were talking about how after they get to put in their place, they do tend to just kind of sit and contemplate or
right.
wait for the other bear to finish their
And it's all part of that physical communication that the bears have with one another. They don't have the muscles in their face to make different facial expressions. So that cowboy walking, that rubbing up on the tree, the bluff charge, it's all a form of communication.
But like you said, it is very unusual for them to, at least in our view, that's the other thing, is we only see what we see.
Right.
And in the spring or in early summer, they do come back covered in wounds.
Mm-hmm.
So there is quite a bit of physical encounters that go on during mating season.
Right.
Which is different than during nom-nom season, you know.
Grocery store season.
Being at the grocery store. Being at the sushi bar.
Yeah, and I am fairly certain that this is 474. At least as certain as I ever am with a lesser known bear.
I have no idea, so there you go. It's okay to not know. And
Absolutely.
I know there are a lot of people on the chats who just don't even try to identify them because they're just, just enjoy watching the bears.
Yeah.
It's okay to just enjoy watching the bears.
Yeah, there's definitely nothing wrong with that.
I wanted to talk for a moment about, if it's okay, about volunteering for the Park Service.
Oh, please, yeah, that'd be great.
A lot of people have asked, how did you land that gig? And I started in doing this kind of activity. Find your local, just start. Find your local park, find your local nonprofits are always wanting volunteers. It is just amazing the things that people will give you to do when you don't want to be paid. I can tell you that I have done a lot of stuff as a volunteer that graduate students, they cannot get jobs doing.
Right.
And so go out there, find your local, there's rescue, a lot of animal rescue places are desperate for volunteers. Start doing that and then just listen to what people have to say, what opportunities. I know in the Bay Area, I'm from San Francisco, there's a lot of opportunities with raptors.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Raptor Works, there's a couple of rangers here in the park that have worked in that program. So as you put your hours in, you'll learn more and more opportunities arise, and who knows, where you find yourself. I never thought I would be on a platform talking to Ranger Dave.
Talking to thousands of people about wild brown bears.
Yeah, no, and that started with just learning how to take care of, we've got a 503, got a nice fish.
Excellent. That's a good, I'm going to zoom in on that.
Yeah, that's a good, you can see that fish is no longer silver.
Right, it's a great example of what the silvers look like when they're in their spawning colors.
He's going for the belly and the skin.
Yep.
A lot of the paid staff are jealous, because we actually get to stand here for hours and watch the animals and interpret and work with the public.
Right.
Whereas I believe Ranger Anella is sitting in front of a computer in an office right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's her job. Her job is, to make the Park Service work for the public. And when we were at Point Reyes, remember she would do a gray whale walk, but we were out on the platforms all day. The other thing that's kind of funny is that people would say, I went and I never saw a whale, or and I'm like, well, I stood there for 8 hours and looked at the ocean. And I did see a whale.
Right.
So you do get the opportunity to see things. I wanted to bring up, this will be big news for people, that the people on the Valley Tour yesterday saw a sow with 4 spring cubs.
That's right.
We don't know who that bear is. I know that the ranger who was on the tour did take some pictures. I haven't seen them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad to hear that, because There are bear tails and fish tails, so I was glad we have documented that this really was. And that group was with a subadult also. That was about 3 miles out of the park, out of Brook's camp area.
And that that very well could be a bear that we've never seen before on the Brooks River.
Right.
There's a lot of bears in this area that maybe don't use the Brooks River or don't use it often enough to be noticed. And there's a ton of bears out in Margot Creek. There's a ton of bears near Savanoski, patrolling the beach around Neck Neck Lake. Very close to Brooks River.
We may never see that bear.
Yeah, we may.
I never really saw a lot of 410 on the cams that much because, of course, she's sleeping. The other day she was sleeping off the Valley Road. She raised her arm and she looked just like Sasquatch laying there. It was really remarkable. Slept there for quite a while. We had to walk people through the marsh to walk around her. Even in personal, it is almost impossible to watch a bear eating fish without thinking nom nom nom.
I'm getting hungry watching them.
Yeah. Oh, another visitor asked me today, is it always the same bears who come back here?
We do seem to get kind of the usual suspects, especially at this time of year. But not necessarily. We have new bears show up every year, it seems.
And some bears show up briefly in the spring.
Right.
And never in the fall. Or vice versa.
Others will come kind of sporadically. 89 backpack seems to show up for a day or two here and there, and then disappears for weeks at a time. And yeah, we don't know where he goes. We don't know where a lot of these bears go when they're not on the river.
October, November?
Yeah, all the way up until the end of October, somewhere around there, and they'll start to disappear around the middle of October generally.
I thought it was interesting last year, the bears, even when there were a few bears left around, but that's when we very occasionally saw moose on the cams.
Right.
And then it was amazing to see wolf packs on the cams. That was really remarkable to watch them moving into the area once the bears had moved out.
Right.
Earlier this year, we saw a single wolf quite a bit.
Yeah.
When there was so much salmon just left over because the salmon was so plentiful that they were high grading, eating only the most nutritious parts, and the rest was left around, and wolf would come down, take a salmon, go up.
Yeah, you never really know what you're going to see every time you turn on the cam. It's always a surprise. So we are coming up a little over our hour mark, so we'll sign off for now. If you're looking forward to more play-by-plays, we've got another one coming up tomorrow, 4 p.m. Alaska time, and we'll be posting a schedule for a rough schedule anyways for the next week or so for play-by-plays and chats coming up here at some point today.
We've been lucky with the weather so far.
We have.
Yep.
So thanks everybody for joining us today. Thank you Explore.org, our nonprofit partner, for making this all happen.